You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. Dusk was bleeding into late afternoon when Elias surrendered himself to the Grand Meridian Hotel. Its lobby exhaled a scent of time itself, stale upholstery and memories undisturbed for decades. Behind the counter, a man named Finch, gaunt and incurious, requested Elias's name without lifting his eyes from the scarred laminate, his voice a dry rustle. He slid a tarnished brass key forward. A disquiet settled over Elias immediately, a counterpoint to the bone-deep weariness from his flight. Yet the primal need for rest, for the solace of a hot shower, overruled the nascent dread, eclipsing the whispers of ill repute he'd dismissed earlier. A bed was paramount. The ascent to the 4th floor occurred within a shuddering metal cage, the elevator groaning its reluctance while the overhead bulb pulsed erratically. Elias massaged his temples, questioning the worth of this entire business venture. Stepping out, his feet sank slightly into threadbare carpet he'd patterned with stains of ambiguous origin. The corridor stretched before him, bathed in a weak, sepia-toned luminescence from infrequent sconces. His room door, number 412, appeared ancient, besieged by time more aggressively than its neighbors. The brass knob bore verdigris blooms, the wood near the threshold scarred and splintered. The key resisted, a brief metallic argument, before yielding with a reluctant click. Inside, the air hung thick with dust motes dancing in the thin light, sharpened by the tang of cheap disinfectant. A narrow bed hugged the right wall. A tall, brooding wardrobe occupied one corner, opposite a small bathroom whose door, warped and defiant, refused to fully close without a forceful shove. The room's single window gazed upon an impassive brick wall across the tight alley, swallowing the view. Claustrophobia began its subtle constriction. Elias deposited his suitcase onto a diminutive table beside the bed, extracting crumpled work shirts he vaguely intended to press, should an iron surface somewhere within this neglected establishment. He sought the bathroom, needing the shock of cold water. Above the mirror, a naked bulb glared with disproportionate intensity, casting the cramped corners into deeper shadow. Bending to the basin, he splashed icy water onto his face, the grime and fatigue of travel momentarily sluiced away. Straightening, Elias confronted his reflection and paused. It was him, undeniably, yet rendered strangely indistinct, the edges blurred as if viewed through troubled water. His hairline seemed smudged, his ears subtly warped, the cheap glass, perhaps, flawed in its making. He touched the cool surface. It felt solid, unblemished. A swipe with a towel changed nothing. Shrugging it off as a quirk of the worn fixture, he returned to the main room, the oddity dismissed, but not entirely forgotten. After stowing away a few garments, he aimed the remote at the small television bolted high on the wall. Its screen flickered, a brief promise of electronic life, then died. A second attempt proved futile. With a sigh, Elias tossed the unresponsive plastic onto the bed. Perhaps a different room, or at least a functional television. He decided to inquire downstairs. Opening his door, a peculiar chill, sharp and sudden, swept over his bare arms. It felt like a pocket of refrigerated air, though no vent was visible. He ignored it, stepping into the dim hall and making his way to the groaning elevator. Downstairs, the lobby was deserted. Finch was absent from the front desk. The door to the small back office stood ajar, revealing only darkness within. Elias tapped the counter, the sound unnaturally loud in the heavy silence that seemed endemic to the hotel. Minutes passed. Giving up, he turned back towards the lift, the sense of isolation deepening. Upon his return to the 4th floor, the door to room 412 stood slightly ajar. He was certain, absolutely certain, he had pulled it shut. A cold wave, distinct from the earlier chill, washed through him. Cautiously, he pushed the door open and scanned the interior. Nothing appeared disturbed. His suitcase remained on the table, his clothes undisturbed. Yet the bathroom door was now open, its harsh light spilling into the room. He knew he had switched it off. A clammy sweat broke out on his palms, though he fiercely rationalized it as exhaustion playing tricks. He extinguished the bathroom light again, pulled the door firmly shut, and engaged the deadbolt on his main door with a decisive thunk. Night fell with swift, urban finality. He tried room service, only to be told, curtly, that the kitchen had closed, nonsensical, as it was barely 8 o'clock. The line crackled with static before the connection abruptly ended. His stomach gnawed, but the thought of venturing out again held no appeal. He consumed a protein bar from his bag, washing it down with metallic-tasting water from the bathroom tap. Changing into sweatpants and a t-shirt, he killed the main light and slid beneath the covers. The sheets felt unnervingly damp, and the ambient temperature seemed to plummet. Gooseflesh pebbled his arms once more. He pulled the thin, inadequate blanket higher, finding little comfort. Sleep remained elusive. A whisper began, insidious and faint, seeming to coil just at the edge of hearing. It sounded like his name. Elias, repeated softly, rhythmically, too indistinct to be certain, yet imbued with a chilling intimacy. His heart hammered against his ribs. He strained to listen, attributing it to the building's old bones, the wind perhaps, but the air within these walls was stagnant, unmoving. The susurration persisted, a low, unwavering chant. His throat tightened. A dizzying lightness spread through him. Forcing his eyes shut, he battled the sound, eventually succumbing to a fitful sleep. He awoke abruptly. His watch read midnight. Only a few hours had passed, yet it felt like an age. The whisper lingered, seemingly embedded within the plaster, now accompanied by a faint, intermittent tapping, like fingernails on wood. Perhaps an old pipe, he reasoned, though the sound felt closer. The air in the room had grown thick, heavy, the dampness in the sheets more pronounced, clinging to his skin. He sat bolt upright, switching on the bedside lamp. Its weak glow illuminated a room subtly altered. The walls seemed nearer, the furniture angled unnaturally. Breathing shallowly, a prisoner of the bed, he finally forced himself up, needing the grounding ritual of washing his face. Flicking the bathroom switch, the glare assaulted his eyes. He glanced at the mirror. His reflection remained distorted, but now something else commanded his attention. Behind his reflected image, hovering near the stained shower curtain, was a shape. Not human, but a wavering patch of concentrated darkness, an absence of light. His hand began to tremble violently. He spun around. The shower alcove was empty. Whipping back to the mirror, the shape had vanished. His breath hitched. His pulse roared in his ears. He splashed his face with water so cold it made his teeth chatter. As he dried himself with a threadbare towel, that strange, localized breeze returned, brushing the nape of his neck, raising the hairs on his arms. Leaning close to the mirror, he searched for flaws, water spots, anything to explain the persistent blur marring his reflection, the slight shimmering around his shoulders and face, reminiscent of a lagging video feed. Nothing. He pressed a hand to his chest, taking a slow, ragged breath. Back in the bedroom, he craved fresh air, a connection to the outside world. He wrestled with the window, pulling upwards with all his strength, but it remained stubbornly sealed. The latch was open, yet the frame wouldn't yield, fused shut by neglect or something more deliberate. Defeated, his arms aching, he stepped back. The room remained permeated by a draft, yet it emanated not from the sealed window, but seemingly from the very structure around him, a chill breathing from the walls. He ventured into the hallway again, desperate for any sign of life. Another guest, a staff member, emptiness greeted him. The elevator indicator showed it marooned on an upper floor. The stairwell, located at the corridor's far end behind a heavy fire door, proved to be locked. Locked? In a hotel? A spike of real panic lanced through him. Retreating to his room felt like surrender, but there was nowhere else. He tried the room phone again. The line was utterly dead, devoid even of a dial tone. His mobile phone displayed no service. Frantic dialing yielded nothing. Claustrophobia tightened its grip. He paced the small confines, the walls seeming to press inwards. One last, futile attempt at the television confirmed its demise. His watch showed it was just past 1 a.m. Retrieving a small flashlight from his suitcase, he switched off the overhead light, plunging the room into deeper gloom, relieved only by the bedside lamp and his torch beam. He decided to check the wardrobe, hoping for extra blankets, perhaps even an old heater. Pulling open the creaking door revealed a single forlorn wire hanger and, tucked in the back, a battered, dust-laden suitcase that was unequivocally not his. It looked ancient. His flashlight beam caught faded initials embossed on its side, illegible beneath the grime. As he peered closer, that icy current of air rushed past him from behind. His heart leaped. He spun, flashlight beam cutting the darkness. Nothing. Skin prickling, he backed away, firmly closing the wardrobe door, resolving to leave the forgotten luggage untouched. The whisper returned, clearer now, more insistent. Elias. Elias. A monotone invocation. He flung open his room door, resolved to flee this cursed place, regardless of the hour. But the hallway lights flickered violently, casting elongated dancing shadows along the walls. Shadows without source, writhing in slow, jerky pantomime. He strode towards the elevator, stabbing the call button repeatedly. The indicator remained stubbornly fixed. The whispering intensified, a pressure building inside his ears. Defeated, he retreated once more to his room, slamming the door behind him, his body shaking uncontrollably. His throat felt constricted. Yanking the thin blanket and damp sheet from the bed, he wrapped them around himself, sinking to the floor, his back pressed against the cold wall. He fought for logic. Old building, faulty wiring, plumbing noises, traffic sounds filtering through inadequate insulation. Yet the mirror, the shape, the palpable cold defied rational explanation. His stomach churned. He stared at the door, half expected the knob to turn. Around 2 a.m., the overhead light flickered one last time and extinguished, leaving only the feeble bedside lamp and his flashlight against the encroaching dark. The whispering morphed into a faint, dry scraping, like nails dragged across wood. He scrambled to his feet, sweeping the flashlight beam around the room. The hulking wardrobe drew his attention. Its door was slightly ajar. He could have sworn he'd closed it securely. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, he approached cautiously, reaching out to push it shut. The wood groaned under his touch. Inside, empty shelves gaped back at him, yet a flicker of movement at the periphery of his vision made him freeze. He flooded the interior with light. Nothing. He backed away slowly, his gaze shifting to the bathroom. The door stood open again, the harsh light blazing within, mocking his earlier efforts. He moved towards it, each step leaden, knees trembling. A low, continuous hum emanated from within, an almost electronic whine. Hand on the knob, he peered inside. The mirror was a void, not reflecting the bathroom, not reflecting him. Just a flat, impenetrable sheet of blackness. Hesitantly, he reached out, touching the glass. It was ice cold. Then, across the obsidian surface, something slid. A swift movement behind where his reflection should have been. A fleeting shape within the void. His chest seized. He snatched his hand back, slamming the bathroom door shut. The whisper surged, loud now, immediate, seeming to curl directly behind his left ear. Tears blurred his vision. Breathing became a conscious, ragged effort. Enough. He grabbed his jacket from the chair, frantically searching for his rental car keys. He'd take the stairs, locked or not. He'd break the door down if necessary. Locating the keys amidst the jumble in his suitcase, he burst back into the hallway and threw himself at the stairwell door, pulling, rattling, ramming it with his shoulder until pain flared. It held fast. He hammered on the unyielding metal, shouting for help into the indifferent silence. No answer. The corridor lights continued their epileptic fit. The disembodied shadows writhed along the far wall, melting around the corner. He ran back to the elevator, pounding the call button like a madman. An ancient groaning answered him. Slowly, agonizingly, the mechanism ground into life. The floor indicator began to descend. A fragile sliver of hope pierced his terror. When the doors eventually parted, the car inside was dimly lit, smelling thickly of mold and decay. He lunged inside, jabbing the L button for the lobby. The doors slid shut. The elevator shuddered, rattled, and jerked to a dead halt between floors. The lights died instantly, plunging him into absolute blackness save for the wavering beam of his flashlight. Panic erupted. He hammered on the doors, his shouts echoing uselessly in the confined space. Tears streamed down his face, his voice cracking. The whisper was inside the elevator with him now, intimate and relentless. Elias, Elias. A blast of frigid air swept past his face. His breath hitched. Fumbling, his fingers slipped across the unresponsive control panel. Then, after an eternity that lasted perhaps a minute, the elevator lurched violently and resumed its movement. Upwards. When it stopped again, the doors opened onto the very same fourth-floor hallway he had just fled. He stumbled out, numb, staring in disbelief as the door to room 412 swung wide open, an invitation or a trap. The elevator doors closed behind him, the car descending silently on its own accord. No escape. He walked, zombie-like, back towards his room. Just before he reached it, the door swung silently shut. His heart hammered against his sternum, a frantic bird trapped in his chest. He reached for the knob. It felt strangely warm, almost hot to the touch. Turning back was unthinkable. There was nowhere to go. He twisted the knob. It yielded without resistance, clicking open softly. The room beyond was darker than before, the bedside lamp now extinguished. He stepped across the threshold, and the door clicked shut behind him. The whispering ceased abruptly, replaced by the faint, intermittent scraping from the wardrobe. He took hesitant steps towards the bed, flashlight beam trembling. The wardrobe door was closed, yet he could see it vibrating faintly. How long until morning? Survival became his sole focus. Daylight surely would banish these phantoms. He would endure, then flee at the first opportunity. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, clutching the flashlight like a talisman, teeth chattering from cold and fear. The icy air swirled around him. He darted a glance at the closed bathroom door. Then, distinctly, he felt the mattress dip beside him, a tangible weight settling onto the other side of the bed. He leaped up, whirling, flashlight beam stabbing at the empty space. Nothing there, but the indentation lingered for a heartbeat, a ghostly impression, before the mattress slowly regained its shape. A profound numbness, born of sheer terror, spread through him. He retreated to the far wall, standing rigid, flashlight trained on the bed, waiting. Finally, through a minuscule gap in the heavy curtains, the first tentative gray fingers of dawn probed the room. The faint light rendered the space mundane, almost ordinary, though the memory of the night clung like a shroud. He moved with frantic haste, stuffing clothes haphazardly into his suitcase, abandoning any thought of neatness. The door opened without protest. The hallway appeared unchanged, the lights now burning with steady, unwavering banality. He raced to the elevator, summoning it with a trembling finger. It arrived promptly. This time the descent was swift, uninterrupted. The doors opened onto the lobby. Finch stood behind the desk, engrossed in paperwork, the picture of normalcy. Elias practically babbled his intention to check out. The clerk offered no inquiry, merely produced a bill. Elias paid without looking at it, his hands shaking as he fumbled with his wallet. Then he was through the main doors, bursting into the cool morning air, gasping it in like a drowning man. He didn't look back. He threw his suitcase into the rental car and drove, accelerating away from the Grand Meridian as fast as the engine would allow. He ignored the meeting scheduled for later that day. He drove until the city skyline was a smudge in his rearview mirror, finding refuge in a brightly lit chain hotel, bustling with oblivious travelers. His hands trembled on the steering wheel for miles. A part of him remained trapped in that fourth-floor room, forever listening for the whisper, forever feeling that unnatural cold. Escape was all that had mattered. It was all that mattered still. The forest floor whispered secrets beneath my boots, a soft susurrus of decaying leaves, until alien sounds intruded, hushed, frantic murmurs, starkly out of place in this cathedral of green. I became stone still, a sudden ice shard in my chest as the pulse hammered against my ribs. Solitude, my cherished companion, had fled. What unfolded next would twist my pilgrimage into the wild heart of the mountains, into a desperate scramble for existence. I've always moved slightly apart from the human tide, finding solace in the stoic company of ancient trees and the fleeting grace of wild things. So, when a week unfurled, free from obligation, the decision was instant. Gear packed, spirit yearning, I steered towards the high, brooding peaks of the Cascades, seeking the profound silence only true wilderness offers. Months I'd dreamt of this escape. Just Silas, the whisper of nylon walls, and leagues of untouched earth stretching towards the infinite sky. The initial days were pure benediction. I pressed deep into the backcountry labyrinth, finally pitching my shelter in a sun-dappled clearing beside a stream that chattered like liquid silver over smooth stones. The air, sharp and invigorating, carried the resinous perfume of pine mingled with the delicate sweetness of alpine blooms. Evenings found me mesmerized by the celestial tapestry flung across the night, a diamond dust spectacle undimmed by the orange glow of distant cities, the crackle of my modest fire, a counterpoint to the vast silence. Day 3 dawned bright, beckoning exploration higher up the massif. With water, rations, and a kit for wounds stowed in a day pack, I left my main camp stand and sentinel. The ascent was demanding, a lung-testing climb, yet every switchback revealed vistas that stole the breath, valleys unfurling below like emerald carpets. It was late afternoon, the sun angling low, when the discord began. I'd paused on a moss-cushioned log, absorbing the forest's gentle symphony, when the unnatural murmur snagged my attention. A dangerous curiosity, sharp as a thorn, pulled me forward. Soundlessly, I advanced, utilizing the dense weave of trees and tumbled granite for cover. The voices sharpened, coalescing into the low, stressed tones of perhaps 3 men. Words remained elusive, but the palpable strain, the coiled tension in their exchange, vibrated through the air. Finally, I reached the fringe of a small, shadowed hollow. Peering around the gnarled trunk of a venerable oak, I saw them. 3 figures clad in somber hues clustered near a freshly dug depression in the earth. Unmistakably, horrifyingly, a shallow grave. A glacial wave washed through me as one man hauled a bulky, tarpaulin-shrouded shape towards the pit. Recognition struck, visceral and sickening, though my mind recoiled, refusing the reality. Not here, not in this sanctuary. One man, tall, distinguished by a livid, jagged scar cleaving his cheek, radiated authority. His commands were curt, guttural barks as the others wrestled the grim burden into the hole. My gaze remained locked, morbidly transfixed, while every primal nerve shrieked, "Flee!" Then, a fatal misstep born of shock. My weight shifted. A dry twig beneath my boot cracked, the sound detonating in the charged stillness like a pistol shot. 3 heads swiveled, eyes finding mine across the clearing. An eternity compressed into a single suspended heartbeat. Then the scarred man, Grizz, roared, "Get him!" and the world exploded into violence. I bolted. Sheer, unthinking flight propelled me through tangled undergrowth, over decaying logs, lungs screaming for air, heart threatening to batter its way free of my ribs. Behind me, the heavy thud of pursuit, the guttural curses, fuel to my terror. No plan existed, no destination, only the desperate imperative to widen the gap between myself and that clearing. But these woods were known to them too. Their relentless pace narrowed the distance. A gunshot cracked the air, the projectile whining past, ripping splinters from bark mere inches from my skull. Instinctively, I flinched, stumbled on the treacherous terrain. Down I plunged, tumbling headlong down a steep, brush-choked embankment, branches lashing my face, unseen rocks delivering brutal impacts. I landed in a heap at the bottom, stunned, breath knocked ragged. A moment of surrender, a certainty of the end. But their voices, closer now, sliced through the days. Survival, raw and potent, surged anew. Ignoring the fire in my side, the warm slickness tracing a path down my temple, I clawed my way upright and plunged onward. Dusk bled into the forest, lengthening shadows, blurring edges, painting the landscape in shades of gray and indigo. I used the deepening gloom, weaving erratically between trunks, doubling back where the terrain allowed. My hunters' voices ebbed and flowed, sometimes distant, sometimes terrifyingly near. They were fanning out, attempting to encircle me. Night fell utterly, swallowing the last light. Panic had driven me far from any discernible path. I was adrift in unfamiliar territory, hunted, lacking supplies, isolated beyond any hope of summons. The stark reality struck with physical force. Blind flight was suicide. Thought strategy, that was the only currency left. Forcing stillness, I pressed my back against the rough bark of a massive fir, striving to muffle the ragged gasps tearing from my throat. As my vision adapted to the profound darkness, I assessed my surroundings. Leftward, the ground fell away sharply. To my right, the hulking silhouette of a boulder cluster loomed. And ahead, was that a faint, silvery shimmer? Water? An idea sparked, fragile but potent, perilous certainly, but the sole option presenting itself. Drawing a deep, unsteady breath, I moved again, this time with deliberate stealth, towards the suspected water source, each rustle of leaf litter, each snap of a twig underfoot, amplified to cannon fire in my hyper-alert state. Desperation, mingled with a thread of hope, drove me onward. I emerged onto the bank of a swift-flowing river. Moonlight glanced off churning rapids, revealing white water boiling over submerged rocks. Treacherous, potentially lethal, yet also my most promising avenue of escape. Just as I poised to commit myself to the current, a voice rasped from the tree line behind me. "Stop right there." I turned. Grizz stepped from the shadows, weapon leveled unwaveringly at my chest. Rook and Jax materialized beside him, their faces masks of fury and exertion. "Nowhere left to run," Grizz sneered, a cruel amusement twisting his scarred lips. "Should have minded your own business, boy." Hands rising slowly, my mind raced, seeking an impossible escape. "Look," I managed, striving for a steady tone. "I don't know you. I don't know what this is about. I saw nothing. Let me walk away, I swear. You'll never hear from me." Grizz emitted a short, harsh bark of laughter, devoid of humor. "Nice try, kid. Can't risk it. Nothing personal, you get it. Just business." His weapon lifted slightly. Time seemed to stretch, attenuating. I saw the minute tightening of his finger on the trigger, the cold finality in his eyes. and in that sliver of eternity, I chose. I flung myself backward into the icy embrace of the river. The frigid shock stole my breath. Panic surged as the powerful current seized me, tumbling me end over end in the churning darkness. I fought desperately towards the surface, gulping air amidst the chaos as I was swept violently downstream. Gunshots erupted, bullets striking the water around me with angry splashes. But the river, tumultuous and wild, was now my improbable shield, carrying me rapidly beyond their reach. Through the spray, I caught fleeting glimpses of my pursuers pounding along the bank, their shouts fading into frustrated echoes. The ensuing passage, minutes, an hour, became a maelstrom of roaring water, bruising encounters with unseen rocks, and desperate lungfuls of air snatched between submersions. Battered, swallowing mouthfuls of the frigid current, I felt certain each moment was my last. Then, gradually, the river's fury eased. Summoning the last dregs of strength, my numb fingers closed around a low-hanging branch. I hauled myself onto the muddy bank, collapsing in a fit of coughing, shivering uncontrollably, too depleted to move. As the adrenaline subsided, the grim truth settled heavily. Alive, yes, but lost, injured, hypothermic, and hunted by killers. No provisions, no bearings, utterly alone. The night air bit through my sodden clothes, yet surrender wasn't an option. I had endured this far. The spark of defiance remained. With the first faint blush of dawn painting the eastern sky, I forced my protestant's body upright. Every muscle shrieked, a symphony of agony I had to ignore. Movement was survival. I followed the river's course, reasoning it offered the best chance of encountering civilization. Each sound, a squirrel's chatter, a falling pine cone, sent jolts of fear through me, convinced my hunters had somehow tracked me through the watery escape. Hours crawled by. The sun climbed, its warmth a slow blessing on my damp clothes. Exhaustion gnawed, hunger cramped my belly. Fear remained a constant, cold companion, yet I propelled myself forward, one painful step after another. Mid-afternoon brought the most beautiful music I had ever heard, the distant thrum of internal combustion engines. Hope surged, lending speed to my faltering steps. I burst through the final screen of trees and beheld it, a ribbon of asphalt. And there, shimmering like a desert oasis, stood a ranger station. I stumbled through the door, nearly collapsing, startling the two uniformed figures within. "Help!" I gasped, the word torn from my raw throat. "Please, men, in the forest. They killed someone." The aftermath was a disorienting blur. Park rangers, then state troopers, eventually somber-faced FBI agents. Hours of questioning, recounting the terror. Search teams mobilized, helicopters beating the air above the canopy, scouring the sector I indicated. They found it, the disturbed earth, the shallow grave, exactly as described. The victim, a local businessman, reported missing weeks prior, but of Grizz, Rook, and Jax, no trace remained. They had vanished back into the wilderness that had almost claimed me. Officials commended my bravery. I felt no bravery, only the sharp awareness of improbable luck, tinged with the bitter taste of foolishness. My quest for solitary communion had nearly ended in a shallow, unmarked grave. Driving away days later, back towards the familiar world, I knew the wild places would never look the same. The forest, once my refuge, now held menacing shadows, whispered secrets I could no longer ignore. Yet it had also revealed a resilience within me, a core of endurance I hadn't known existed. I don't seek solitude in the deep woods anymore, not alone, but I return sometimes. When I do, my senses are heightened, eternally vigilant, because the wilderness taught me a brutal lesson. Even amidst profound beauty, darkness can coil unseen, and survival, sometimes, is simply about being ready when it strikes. The rifle's sharp report reverberated through the timber, arresting my motion mid-stride. This was intended as a sylvan pilgrimage, a sojourn into quietude to unburden the mind and drink deep of the wild. Instead, I stumbled upon a tableau never meant for outside eyes, and existence itself became a frantic flight. The wilderness has always been my truest sanctuary. Raised in a hamlet clinging to the folds of the Appalachians, I knew the forest's shadowed aisles better than the confines of my own home. So, when the city's relentless hum threatened to fray my nerves entirely, the remedy was instinctual. The woods, a week sequestered from deadlines, liberated from the stale air of office machinations, promised restoration. 5 days of solitary trekking, nights beneath a canopy of stars, a simple design. Life, however, rarely adheres to blueprints. The initial 48 hours unfolded flawlessly, air crisp as cider, sunlight filtering through a riotous tapestry of crimson and gold spun by autumn's loom. I pushed deep into the backcountry, leaving behind the well-trod paths and communal fire rings. Here, solitude reigned, shared only with the whispering pines and the fleeting curiosity of white-tailed deer. Day 3 beckoned towards uncharted territory, a faint trace, more animal-run than park-maintained trail, snaked into denser woods. Confidence in map, compass, and the phone's digital eye spurred me onward. The allure of discovery, after all, was the very essence of this escape. Late afternoon light slanted through the trees when the first shot cracked the stillness. I halted, a knot of confusion tightening in my gut. Hunting was forbidden here, the season dormant. A ranger managing problematic wildlife, perhaps. Then voices drifted on the breeze, coarse, laced with anger. An undercurrent in their tone prickled the skin along my nape. This felt illicit, clandestine, deeply wrong. Prudence warred with an insistent curiosity. Wisdom dictated retreat, retracing my steps. Yet wisdom has seldom been my governing virtue. Soundlessly, as fallen leaves, I advanced towards the sound, the woods gradually thinning, yielding to a small sun-dappled clearing. From the concealment of a broad-shouldered oak, I peered into a scene that iced my veins. 3 figures occupied the space, rifles cradled loosely. Not the weapons, but the stillness at their feet seized my breath. 2 deer, undeniably slain outside the law's sanction, and a far larger shape shrouded beneath a tarpaulin. "Get it loaded, damn it!" one man snarled, his voice grating. "Got to clear out before some ranger pokes his nose in." As they wrestled with the tarp, it slipped, unveiling the horror beneath. A hand flew to my mouth, stifling a choked gasp. No deer, this. A bear, immense, its dark coat darkly matted with gore. Poachers, violators of sanctuary. My thoughts surged. Evidence, report, action. With excruciating slowness, I fumbled for my phone. A photograph, just one clear image. The brittle snap of a twig beneath my boot exploded like ordnance in the charged silence. 3 heads swiveled instantly, eyes locking onto my vicinity. "The hell was that?" one demanded, weapon lifting. Hesitation was a luxury I couldn't afford. I pivoted and bolted, crashing through the undergrowth, all prior stealth abandoned in raw panic. Shouts erupted behind me, morphing into the terrifying rhythm of pursuit. "There! Get him!" a voice roared. "Don't let him slip!" Terror lent velocity to my limbs. I plunged through the forest labyrinth, branches whipping at my face, downed logs becoming desperate hurdles. Yet I heard them closing, their familiarity with this terrain matching my own desperate flight. They were driven by something darker than sport. A rifle barked, spitting wood splinters from a trunk mere inches from my skull. They weren't just chasing, they were trying to silence me. I wrenched myself left, a wild deviation hoping to spoil their aim. My lungs were furnaces, legs turning to sodden weights, but slowing down was unthinkable. The campsite, my satellite phone, my lifeline, became a desperate beacon, but panic had scrambled my internal compass. The familiar landmarks blurred into an alien landscape. I ran blind, propelled solely by the primal imperative to escape. Another shot, closer. A searing heat grazed my arm. Glancing down, I saw the fabric of my jacket torn, blood blooming from a shallow furrow. The lethality of my predicament struck with physical force. Capture meant death. Bursting from a dense thicket, I found myself teetering on the lip of a precipitous ravine. Far below, the river roared, a white-throated torrent churning over boulders. A moment of paralysis, caught between the hunters and the abyss. Their nearing shouts spurred a decision born of desperation. I began scrambling down the treacherous slope, loose scree skittering underfoot. Twice my purchase failed. Only frantic grabs at exposed roots and saplings saving me from a fatal tumble. Above, I heard the poachers arrive at the ravine's edge, their voices sharp with frustration. They'd lost visual contact in the dense vegetation clinging to the slope. I flattened myself against the cool rock, straining to muffle my ragged gasps. "Must have gone down," one surmised. "You two circle round, head him off at the bottom. I'll track him from here." My spirit plummeted, a pincer movement. My gaze fell to the river below. A significant drop, the current visibly savage. Yet what alternative remained? Drawing a ragged breath, I launched myself from the ravine wall, half sliding, half falling down the remainder of the slope. Dislodged stones cascaded around me, betraying my flight path. A shout from above, another gunshot echoing impotently. I was a fleeting, erratic target. I struck the water, feet first. The glacial shock punched the air from my lungs. Instantly, the current seized me, dragging me under into a maelstrom of freezing, suffocating darkness. Disoriented, tumbling, survival instinct finally clawed its way through the panic. I fought towards the surface, breaking through with a desperate gasp. The river became my frantic conveyance, sweeping me downstream, the poachers' enraged cries dwindling behind me. Safety, however, remained elusive. The watercourse was a treacherous beast, littered with submerged rocks and hypnotic whirlpools. Repeatedly, I was sucked beneath the surface, each re-emergence costing precious, dwindling strength. At last, the river broadened, its pace easing. Summoning a final reserve, I battled towards the bank, hauling my sodden, shivering body onto a shore of smooth, cold stones. I lay there, coughing convulsively, tremors racking my frame, for an indeterminate passage of time. As adrenaline ebbed, the starkness of my reality asserted itself, soaked through, temperatures plummeting with the encroaching night, utterly lost, and somewhere in the darkening wilderness, 3 armed men harbored murderous intent. My phone, my link to rescue, rested on the riverbed. I possessed only the clothes I wore and the meager contents of my pockets. Yet I drew breath, and breath meant possibility. Forcing my aching limbs to obey, I surveyed my surroundings. The river had borne me far, but complacency was a luxury I could not afford. They might still be searching. Help was paramount, reporting the atrocity essential. But first, immediate survival, staving off the encroaching cold. Hypothermia waited patiently in my waterlogged clothes. Moving with the leaden gait of exhaustion, I gathered scraps of dry wood. Miraculously, my waterproof match case remained secure in a pocket. Soon, a small, hesitant flame flickered to life, shielded within a natural declivity to minimize its visibility. Huddled close, seeking its meager warmth, I replayed the day's horrors. The image of the slaughtered bear burned behind my eyelids. How long had this desecration persisted? How many lives stolen? A conviction hardened within me. They could not profit from this. I had to reach civilization, bear witness, but survival demanded precedence. The night stretched, an eternity punctuated by the forest's unfamiliar sounds. Every snapped twig sent jolts of fear through me, convinced my hunters had found their quarry. Dawn arrived not with trumpets, but with a quiet diffusion of gray light and a resurgence of resolve. At first light I set off, following the river's downstream course. Civilization lay that way, eventually. My body protested. Hunger gnawed, dampness clung stubbornly, but the vision of those men, of their callous destruction, propelled me onward. Late afternoon brought the cadence of human voices, not the harsh barks of the poachers, but the easy cadence of conversation. Hikers. Relief washed over me, hot and stinging behind my eyes. They stared, understandably shocked by the apparition I presented, muddied, bruised, eyes wide with trauma. They offered sustenance, water, and blessedly, one carried a satellite phone. Within hours, I sat in a ranger station, the tail tumbling out, met by expressions of growing disbelief and gravity. The ensuing days were a maelstrom of official statements, diligent Park Service investigations, and unwelcome media flashes. My abandoned campsite was located. Guided by my harrowing description, they found the poachers' grisly abattoir in the clearing. The perpetrators were apprehended a week later, caught attempting to peddle bear parts on the clandestine market. Conservation groups lauded me, a reluctant hero. I felt no heroism, only the sharp memory of being an accidental witness who then did the only sensible thing, fled for my very life. The ordeal left its indelible mark. My love for the wild endures. I remain most myself beneath an unbounded sky. Yet now, that love is tempered by an awareness of humanity's shadowed potential, the avarice capable of extinguishing magnificence like that bear for mere gain. I return to those mountains, though not to that precise haunted clearing. Perhaps never to that clearing. I return to reaffirm what is precious, to remember that sometimes righteousness demands risk, and to honor the wild sanctuaries that remain, understanding acutely the imperative to shield them. Because ultimately, that is the crux, not the terror, nor the chase, nor the narrow deliverance. It is the necessity of defending something larger than oneself, even when fear constricts the throat, even when danger looms large. For if we abdicate that responsibility, who remains to stand guard? A stillness hung over Silas's wayside, thick and strange in the mid-afternoon Nebraska light. The vacancy of the gravel lot should have warned me, a void against the endless cornrows flanking Interstate 80. But hunger gnawed louder than intuition. 6 hours westward had hollowed me out. The dashboard glowed 2:47 p.m. My stomach had been a rumbling cavern for the last 100 miles. The diner stood marooned, an island in a sea of green stalks. Its neon promise, open, flickered with a weary electric hum. A tiny bell above the door offered a tinny announcement of my arrival into air, thick with the ghosts of fried onions and stale coffee. Overhead, fluorescent tubes droned, casting a sterile luminescence upon cream-yellow walls, and booths upholstered in cracked crimson vinyl. Along one flank ran a counter, its chrome trim dulled, fronted by a row of bolted, vacant metal stools. "Grab a seat," a voice rasped from the kitchen's depths, punctuated by the sharp sizzle of fat-meeting heat. I slid onto a stool near the center, the vinyl sighing beneath me. My forearms met a counter filmed with a faint, persistent stickiness. Before me lay a plastic-coated menu, its edges dog-eared, its surface clouded by countless wipings. The cook materialized from the back, a lean silhouette in his 50s. Thinning silver hair clung to his scalp. His white apron bore the abstract art of kitchen mishaps. A plastic tag pinned crookedly read, "Gus." "Coffee?" He gestured toward a waiting mug, his movements economical. "Please, black." My voice emerged unused, gravelly. He poured, the liquid emerging near boiling, dark as engine oil. The first sip scalded, tasting precisely as bitter as it looked. "Hungry?" Gus poised a pencil over a small notepad. "Cheeseburger. Fries." "Got it." He vanished back into the heat and noise. It was then I heard it, a distinct clearing of the throat, just 2 stools down. I swiveled my head. An old man sat there. He hadn't been there a moment ago. I'd have sworn the counter was empty. He wore a jacket of brown tweed, distinguished by leather elbow patches. His white hair combed meticulously back from his forehead. Wire-rimmed spectacles rested on the bridge of his nose. "Afternoon," he offered, a slight tilt of his head acknowledging me. His voice was soft, textured like dry leaves rustling, carrying a faint echo of the South. "Hi," I managed, startled by the sudden company in this vacuum. "Driving far?" he inquired gently. "San Francisco. Business or adventure?" "New job," I admitted, usually taciturn with strangers. Something in his calm, grandfatherly demeanor disarmed me. "A new chapter. Splendid." A faint smile touched his lips. "Made that journey myself. Oh, must be 40 years past now. Different world then. Fewer ribbons of asphalt, more havens like this one." His hand swept vaguely, indicating our surroundings. The scent of searing beef wafted from the kitchen, summoning another growl from my belly. "What brings you this way?" I asked, more out of politeness than curiosity. "Just drifting through. Seems to be my occupation these days. Retirement gifts you the liberty to roam." A dry chuckle escaped him. "My wife, bless her, always said I had restless feet." "Had?" "Passed on. 5 years now. The cancer," he stated plainly, devoid of pity or dramatics. "I'm sorry," he offered a slight shrug. "It's the way of things, isn't it? We shared 42 fine years. No cause for complaint there." Gus reappeared, my plate clattering onto the counter, steam rising in fragrant curls. "Anything else for you?" "No, this looks great, thanks," the old man observed as I lifted the burger. "Gus makes a decent meal, knows his grill." I took a bite. He was right. Juicy patty, perfectly molten cheese, the bun toasted to a delicate crispness at the edges. "It's really good," I confirmed after swallowing. "Try the fries with his hot sauce. Makes it himself." I spotted a nondescript bottle nearby, its label handwritten. Gus's Fire. As I ate, the old man talked. He spun tales of his decades teaching history in a small Georgia town, of his 3 children now flung far across the map, of the motorhome he'd acquired upon retiring. Listening, I felt the highway tension coiled in my shoulders begin to loosen. His narratives flowed easily, laced with quiet humor and sharp observation. "And your name, son?" he asked during a lull. "Leo." "A pleasure, Leo. I'm Arthur. Most call me Art." We shook hands across the space between our stools. His grip was surprisingly solid, cool but firm. The current of conversation resumed. Art recounted discoveries of hidden gem diners, suggested scenic detours I might appreciate, mused on the slow erosion of small-town character he'd witnessed over the years. I finished the burger, turned my attention to the fries, crisp exteriors yielding to fluffy interiors. The fire sauce added a pleasant, vinegary heat. "How long have you been on this particular trip?" I asked Art. He paused, gazing into the middle distance. "About 2 weeks, I reckon. Left Atlanta back on the 1st. "That's quite a stretch." "Every day's a weekend when you're retired." That faint smile again. "No deadlines, nowhere I absolutely must be." I noticed his coffee cup sat empty. "Need a top-up?" I reached for the carafe Gus had left. "No, thank you kindly. Best be moving along shortly anyway." Gus emerged once more, wiping greasy hands on his apron. "Everything satisfactory?" "Excellent, thanks," I said. "Can I get the check?" Gus's brow furrowed slightly. "Check?" "For the burger and fries." "Ah, right." He scribbled on his pad. $12.50. I pulled out my wallet. "And add his coffee to mine," I said, nodding toward Art's stool. A deeper confusion creased Gus's forehead. "Whose coffee?" "His." I pointed. The stool was vacant, the cup gone. I scanned the length of the counter, the empty booths. Gus and I were the only souls in the place. "Mister," Gus said slowly, his gaze steady, "you're the only one who's come in all afternoon." The space where Art's cup had rested was clean, reflecting the humming fluorescence. Only my plate and mug remained. "No, there was an old man, right there." My voice felt thin. "We were talking for ages. Art, he had a tweed jacket, glasses." Gus shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. "Nobody but you. I've been at the grill, sure, but I can see the whole room from there." You've been sitting right here, eating your meal, alone. A cold knot formed in my gut, the recently consumed food suddenly a leaden weight. That's not possible. We talked about his wife, his kids, teaching history down in Georgia. Sir, Gus's voice softened with concern. You feeling all right? Maybe sit tight a spell before you drive again. My hands trembled as I extracted $15, laid it on the sticky counter. Keep it, I mumbled, needing air, needing distance. The bell above the door gave its brittle jingle as I pushed outside. The afternoon sun struck like a physical blow after the diner's dimness. My car sat solitary in the gravel expanse. No other vehicles. Keys slipped through my clumsy fingers, clattered on the stones. I snatched them up, slid behind the wheel, twisted the ignition. Pulling back onto the highway, a glance in the rearview mirror showed Silas's wayside shrinking, its neon sign a fading pulse. My grip on the wheel was white-knuckled. A film of cold sweat slicked my skin. I pushed the car west, exceeding the speed limit, the cornfields blurring into an endless, hypnotic green wall on either side. The sun bled toward the horizon. Had I hallucinated the entire encounter? Sheer exhaustion playing tricks? Yet it felt utterly tangible. Art's quiet voice, the cadence of his laugh, the specific details of his life, the way light glinted off his spectacles, the definite pressure of his handshake. I recalled him mentioning his wife's death 5 years prior, his departure from Atlanta on the 1st of the month. In the next town, I pulled into the harsh glare of a gas station. Inside, amongst the candy bars and motor oil, I found a local newspaper. October 15th. My fingers, still unsteady, tapped onto my phone's browser. Atlanta obituaries. 5 years ago. A few frantic searches, and then, there it was, dated October 15th, 2019. Arthur Art Pendleton, 72, cherished husband, father, and educator, passed away peacefully following a short illness. Retired history teacher. The accompanying photograph showed him. Tweed jacket, leather patches, wire-rimmed glasses, that neatly combed white hair. The text spoke of 42 years of marriage, 3 children, a passion for travel. The phone slipped from my nerveless grasp, hitting the linoleum floor with a sharp crack. Above me, the gas station's fluorescent lights buzzed, an unnerving echo of the diner. My own reflection stared back from the glass door, pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Outside, dusk had fully descended, pressing darkness against the windows. I thought of the empty highway ahead, the long night drive awaiting me, and Art's words, just drifting through. Back in the car, I let the engine idle for a long time, watching headlights slice through the encroaching night on the interstate. Finally, I picked up the phone again, dialed the number for the nearest motel. The road could wait. Not tonight, not while Art's voice still echoed in my memory, sharing stories of journeys that had definitively ended 5 years ago today. Not while the phantom sensation of his handshake, cool and firm, lingered on my palm, a handshake received at a counter where, according to Gus, I had sat utterly alone. The motel clerk's voice sounded distant, mundane. I booked a room. Driving the short distance, I found myself compulsively checking the rearview mirror. The highway stretched behind me, dark and deserted, yet a profound sense of not being alone prickled the back of my neck. How many other solitary travelers, I wondered, had found unexpected company at Silas's wayside on quiet afternoons? How many had unknowingly shared coffee and conversation with Arthur Pendleton, a man whose final road trip concluded half a decade ago? I pulled into the motel lot, the red neon glow of the vacancy sign washing over my windshield. Tomorrow, the westward journey toward San Francisco, toward a new job and an unknown future, would resume. But tonight demanded stillness, demanded an attempt to reconcile the impossible conversation held in a nowhere diner, demanded I acknowledge the strange companionship found and lost on a lonely highway in the heart of America. It arrived unannounced, a plain brown cube of cardboard resting squarely on my blotter amidst a sedimentary layer of cold case files. No note, no sender, just the box, sealed with indifferent clear tape. My name, Silas, scrawled across the top in thick bleeding marker. Distracted by the blinking light on my answering machine, I sliced the tape without ceremony. Inside, nestled in tissue paper that sighed dust, lay a camera, vintage undeniably, heavy chrome body, cool against my fingertips, paired with a cracked leather strap bearing the ghostly imprint of countless hands. Mine is a grubby profession, private investigation. Stray objects land on my doorstep sometimes. Curiosities people hope I can decipher, trace back to a source, imbue with meaning. I chalk this up as another such puzzle, another eccentric plea for attention. The thought that this inert assembly of metal and glass might fundamentally alter my perception of every captured image never crossed the threshold of my mind. Belief in the spectral isn't part of my toolkit. I trade in insurance scams, illicit affairs, absconded assets, the mundane betrayals of the living. Ghosts, hexes, haunted artifacts. Polite nods and swift subject changes are my usual response. Yet this camera, it possessed a gravity exceeding its physical mass, a density that felt accumulated, layered. Tiny hairline fractures spiderwebbed the lens perimeter. A nebula clouded one corner of the viewfinder. A tattered label clung precariously to the base, whispering M Photo Works, and a serial number eroded into illegibility. Turning it over, I noted the familiar 35mm format, though the spool mechanism had an archaic twist. A single roll of film lay beside it in the box, sealed, its canister marked with script that hinted at German, maybe Cyrillic. A slip of paper accompanied it, bearing only 5 words. A rare find, enjoy. No signature, no context. I shrugged, consigned the note to a drawer overflowing with loose ends, and turned back to the blinking light. Work intervened, a warehouse job, chronic trespassing. My client needed documentation, footprints in the dust, jimmy marks scarring the doorframe, the general disarray within. My reliable digital SLR, offering instant gratification and clarity, was the logical choice. Yet some contrary impulse made me reach for the vintage interloper instead. Curiosity, perhaps, a desire to test its metal. I procured a few standard 35mm rolls from a corner shop, threaded one into the M Photo Works' unfamiliar guts, and spent a grey afternoon cataloguing the warehouse's violated interior, snapping shots of scattered packing materials, gouges on concrete walls, the twisted shackle of the broken padlock. Through the slightly fogged viewfinder, nothing seemed amiss beyond the peripheral blur. Development could wait. Down the street from my apartment, dwells Alistair's photo lab, a relic itself, smelling perpetually of fixer. He's processed film since my own grainy childhood, a man who understands silver halide like a native tongue. When I returned for the prints, his expression was quizzical as he slid the envelope across the counter. "Everything develop all right?" I asked. A non-committal shrug. The negatives were clean, he offered, but some prints showed anomalies, distortions. I blamed the antique lens, the shutter's aged mechanics, logical culprits. Back in the harsh light of my kitchen, I slit the envelope. A tremor, cold and unexpected, traced my spine. Spreading the prints across the Formica tabletop, my gaze snagged on anomalies in nearly half the frames. There, lurking near the edge of a shot depicting debris-strewn concrete, a translucent form hovered, vaguely human, a silhouette sculpted from mist. Another photograph revealed two shapes huddled in the background gloom, draped in what seemed like dark, tattered hoods, faces obscured. They stood just behind a steel shelving unit I distinctly recalled being empty. These weren't figures I'd seen, not through the clouded viewfinder, not with my own eyes. My first thought, stray light, accidental movement, evaporated under scrutiny. The shapes felt wrong, stretched, contorted, wedged into the frame unnaturally. My palms grew slick. I paused, took a deliberate breath, examined the remaining prints. More phantoms emerged. Warped outlines, shadowed figures clinging to corners, leaning at impossible angles, never quite sharp, never quite still. Skepticism is my default setting. A faulty camera, I insisted inwardly. Yet, scrutinizing the prints again, I couldn't reconcile the images with simple light leaks or double exposures. The figures possessed a disturbing intentionality, almost a posture. I slid the photos back into their sleeve, attributing it to mechanical failure, a gremlin in the gears. The following morning, armed with my digital camera, I returned to the warehouse, meticulously replicating each shot, each angle. The resulting images were stark, clear, utterly normal. No ethereal silhouettes, no hooded watchers, just dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Unease lingered, a low hum beneath the surface of my pragmatism, but I resisted the pull towards outlandish conclusions. The next weekend found me on surveillance, a low-rent motel bleeding neon onto the edge of town asphalt. Aiming for inconspicuousness, I parked with a view of the lot as twilight bled into night. My digital camera, I realized too late, was locked in the trunk. But the M Photo Works rested on the passenger seat, a silent invitation. Loading a fresh roll, I clicked off a few frames of the target entering his room. Nothing untoward registered, just the tired motel, the stuttering sign, the anonymous cars. I finished the roll the next morning, dropping it with Alistair, who greeted me with that same furrowed brow when I collected the prints that afternoon. In the confines of my car, the developed images told a familiar, disturbing story. The initial shots were mundane. A man walking, the flickering motel sign, a parked sedan. But then, the shadows returned, closer this time. One hunched against a stairwell wall, a knot of darkness. Another bent near the target's car, folded forwards in a way that tightened my stomach, its arms seeming unnaturally long. I dropped the photos onto the passenger seat, my fingers trembling slightly. Film flaws, processing errors, chemical ghosts. My mind scrambled for rational explanations, but a deeper intuition whispered that this was no glitch. something had shared the frame. Weeks dissolved into a blur of new cases. The vintage camera became a morbid experiment, used sporadically out of a perverse curiosity. Each developed roll yielded the same chilling results: translucent silhouettes mimicking human form, sometimes coalescing into twisted things, with limbs bent at agonizing angles. They materialized in impossible places, clinging near ceilings, partially embedded in solid walls. I found myself rubbing my eyes, trying to dispel the afterimages. The evidence accumulated, undeniable, print after print, and with each roll, the figures seemed to inch closer to the photograph's focal point, as if migrating towards me. One evening, late, the office building hushed around me. I sat under the lone cone of my desk lamp, sifting through the day's surveillance prints. 10 o'clock, silence, thick and heavy. A disturbing progression emerged in the latest batch. Frame 1, a single, dark, hooded figure at the periphery. Frame 2, 2 silhouettes, nearer the center. Frame 3, they dominated the mid-ground, closer to my lens than the person I'd been observing. In the fourth photograph, an appendage, an arm perhaps, or something mimicking one, stretched into the frame. Long, skeletal, fingers splayed unnaturally. Goose flesh prickled my arms. I shoved my chair back, a reflexive need for distance from the glossy paper horrors. A sudden compulsion made me look towards the window. 3rd floor, blinds up. The parking lot below lay empty, bathed in sodium vapor orange. My gaze snagged on the final print. Nausea clenched my gut, captured within a window's reflection in the photo's background. A face. Empty sockets stared back from the glass. It appeared to be directly behind the photographer. Behind me. That was impossible. I pressed my fingers to my temples, heart hammering against my ribs. 10:15 p.m. Time to leave. Lock up. Go home. Sleep offered no refuge. The reflected face replayed behind my eyelids. I mentally retraced taking that specific shot, standing on a sidewalk outside a small office block, focusing on my client entering the building. No one had been behind me. The pavement was deserted. I lay staring at the ceiling, the rhythm of my pulse loud in the quiet room, punctuated by the distant sigh of traffic. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. The next day, resolve hardened. The camera had to go. I placed it back in its cardboard tomb and drove across town to a pawn shop, hazy with dust and desperation. The proprietor squinted, tested the shutter, declared it wasn't worth much. Fine by me. I just wanted it gone. But as he fiddled with the lens, a wave of futility washed over me. How could I explain the fear it instilled? The prints were my only evidence, hardly compelling proof for a pawnbroker. He named a paltry sum. I nearly accepted, but something held me back. A stubborn investigator's itch, a need to understand, to find a rational thread, however thin. "I'll think about it," I mumbled, retrieving the box, the camera's weight settling back onto the passenger seat beside me like a malevolent passenger. For days, I swore off using it, but fresh film rolls sat waiting in my desk drawer, and stubbornness is a cornerstone of my character. On another case, a stakeout near a suburban house, I brought it along, rationalizing it as one last test. The street was placid, punctuated by streetlights and the occasional passing car. I documented the driveway, the mailbox, the darkened windows. Standard procedure. Nothing felt unusual. Dropping the film at Alistair's, I feigned nonchalance, but his guarded look didn't escape me. Later that night, my phone rang. Alistair. He never called. His voice was strained. "Finished your photos, Silas. You should come get them." "Everything all right?" A pause. "I don't want them here overnight." The lab was starkly lit when I arrived. Alistair had the prints spread on the counter like autopsy photos. He pointed wordlessly to a sequence of 4. The same hooded figure appeared in each, positioned directly outside the subject's bedroom window. Its face, turned towards the camera, remained shrouded in shadow, a void within the hood. In the final shot, the figure had moved, standing near a shrub in the yard, seemingly gazing towards the street, towards where I had been parked. Alistair confirmed the negatives were clean, untampered with. He waved away my attempt to pay. "Take them," he said, his voice low. "Just take them and go." I drove straight back to the office, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Inside, I flicked on every light, bathing the room in sterile fluorescence. I laid the new prints alongside the old ones, a growing gallery of dread. Studying them, the pattern was undeniable. The positioning of the shapes, the silhouettes, the hooded entities, it wasn't random. They were converging, incrementally, relentlessly, towards me. My throat felt constricted. I glanced at my own window, dark glass reflecting the overlit room. I strode over and yanked the blinds shut, plunging the office into manufactured night. Pacing, head pounding, I replayed the camera's arrival. Anonymous, untraceable. Calling the authorities felt absurd. No crime, no victim, no tangible threat. Just photographs. Disturbing, yes, but were they real? Was any of this real? That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the office, lights blazing, drifting into uneasy sleep in my chair around 3 a.m. A sound jolted me awake, a dry scrape, insistent against the window pane. Heart slamming, I rose, moved towards the blinded window, mouth parched. Trembling finger lifted a single slat. For a fleeting instant, a dark shape bulked on the fire escape, like a swatch of heavy cloak snagged by the wind. Then, nothing. Just the empty metal gridwork. Eyes playing tricks, I told myself, breathing heavily. I listened for long minutes. Only the city's distant hum answered. I double-checked the window lock and retreated to my chair. Morning brought a decision, or rather, a compromise. The camera now resides in my office safe. I couldn't bring myself to discard it, not entirely. Some part of me believes that severing the connection wouldn't end it, wouldn't answer the gnawing questions. Paranoia? Perhaps. Or perhaps something truly is tethered to that cold metal and scratched glass. Now, every photograph I see, even snapped casually on my phone, undergoes intense scrutiny. My eyes search the backgrounds, the edges, hunting for a familiar hooded shape, a limb bent at an impossible angle. The office blinds stay down. I stick to daylight hours for work, avoiding the late-night solitude. When I must stay, the windows remain averted surfaces. I oscillate between disbelief and a creeping certainty. Are they real, these fractured specters? Am I losing my grip? Each time I recall the prints, the knot tightens in my gut. The camera sits inert in its steel prison, yet I feel its presence, its dense weight. Sometimes, in the deepest quiet, I imagine I hear faint, dry clicks from within the safe, like the shutter firing of its own accord, an echo I can't ignore. And alone in the artificial light of my office, I remember the figures in the photographs, forever me grading, and wonder with a chilling certainty if, frame by frame, click by phantom click, they are still getting closer. The awareness wasn't gradual. It settled, an abrupt pressure in the room's stagnant air. I was sprawled on the divan, fabric clinging damply from my dash through the downpour moments before. Wind gnawed at the window frames. A hollow resonance breathed from the corridor behind me. Familiar groans for a venerable house besieged by storm, I assured myself. Yet as my gaze performed its nervous circuit of the room, a habit lately acquired, it snagged on the leather armchair. It stood unchanged, that oxidized mustard hide, the network of creases and scars mapping its surface, a piece I never occupied, scarcely brushed against. An inherent wrongness clung to it, a staleness. It had been part of the inheritance, bequeathed by a remote uncle, Silas, a man barely a rumor in my life. Disposal was a perpetual intention, perpetually deferred. A lapse I now keenly regretted, for in that moment I could have sworn the seat cushion surrendered to an unseen weight. Invisible, undeniably, but present. My heart initiated a frantic cadence against my ribs. I blinked, attempting to dispel the illusion. Perhaps the storm's theater of shadows, the unsteady glow of the lamp behind me, the lightning's fleeting reflection on the polished floorboards. But no, the leather cushion, usually taut, dipped distinctly inward, succumbing as if to a substantial form. I forced my attention back to the television's flickering late-night inanity, feigning absorption. Still, I felt observed, by eyes that needed no face. The fine hairs at my nape stiffened like iron filings. I recall adjusting my position on the divan, the cheap textile rasping against my skin, striving to regulate the ragged rhythm of my breath. A faint odor permeated the air, aged leather entwined with the scent of damp soil. Then, the barest whisper of sound, the armchair's springs uttering a minute protest. This house, ancient and eccentric, yes, but this diverged into the uncanny. Perspiration filmed my palms, my toes curled into the rug's coarse weave. I fought to disregard it, but the noise clarified. A subtle creaking, the sound of an occupant subtly shifting their posture. Slowly, deliberately, I rose, a step forward. Reluctance warred with a foolhardy compulsion to verify. The floor beneath complained with each footfall. Did the invisible guest register my approach? Reaching the coffee table's edge, I narrowed my eyes. The cushion was unequivocally depressed. Then, almost imperceptibly, it rose and sank anew, a minute weight transfer. My swallow felt like sandpaper on stone. No outline materialized, merely the indentation, evidence enough. Retreating to the divan, my breathing grew heavy, my chest constricted. Outside, the rain intensified its assault, drumming relentlessly against the glass. The storm's rumble seemed to coil around the house. Reason clawed for purchase. Defective foam within the cushion? Moisture warping the frame? Neither hypothesis accounted for the rhythmic undulation, the slow, deliberate settling. My heart refused solace. Sleep was an impossibility. I remained sentinel on the divan, gaze tethered to the chair, flicking occasionally towards the hallway, the bolted front door, then back again. Interior lights sputtered intermittently, the storm vexing the antiquated wiring, likely. Distraction proved futile. I retrieved my phone. The screen displayed No signal. Predictable, out here. This ancestral home, Uncle Silas's rustic retreat, as his will termed it, stood somewhat isolated. I'd sought refuge here from the wreckage of a marriage and mounting debts, yearning for tranquility. Instead, this entity had found me. As hours bled into one another, I experimented with closing my eyes, praying for normalcy upon reopening them. Each furtive glance confirmed the invisible sitter's persistence. Dawn arrived, heralded by the scent of sodden earth, the rain having finally retreated. My eyes felt abrasive, inflamed. I stood, stretching a spine rigid with tension, resolving to expel the damnable chair. Not donation. I'd heave it into the mire outside, abandon it to decay. I strode to the front door, stockinged feet whispering on the floorboards. Seizing the knob, I twisted. Immovable, peculiar. The deadbolt wasn't engaged. I applied more force, leveraging my shoulder. Futile. The kitchen door yielded the same result. Stuck fast. The windows, perpetually sealed by age and paint, now resisted even the slightest give at their hinges. Old, yes, but never before had egress been denied. Frustration curdled with fear in my stomach. Returning to the living room, my intent was to shove the armchair aside, perhaps topple it. But as I neared, a profound wooden groan emanated from its core, like ancient bones protesting disturbance. And then I witnessed it, the backrest, its aged leather folds rippling as if someone were leaning back, ensconcing themselves more comfortably. A sudden, glacial touch grazed my left shoulder, icy fingertips. I recoiled violently, spinning to confront emptiness, only stale air and the ragged sound of my own panic. Sitting was no longer an option. I commenced pacing, arms clamped tightly across my chest, jaw aching from the clench. Weak morning light filtered through the rain-streaked panes, casting a jaundiced pall over the room. My attention snagged on a subtle discoloration on the floor near the chair's feet. Kneeling, I touched it. The wood felt colder there. Rubbing my fingertips together left a faint, greasy residue. Revulsion and dread coiled tighter within me as I wiped my hand on my jeans. Information. Perhaps Uncle Silas's effects held a clue? Boxes languished in the storage closet. I tore through them, sifting brittle receipts, letters, faded photographs. Nothing directly illuminated the chair's mystery until I unearthed a photograph of this very room, dated decades prior. The armchair occupied its precise location. A man sat within it, features obscured by time and dim light, yet conveying a stern countenance, a rigid bearing. Scrawled on the reverse, in my uncle's looping script, "Don't move it. Ever." A tremor traced my spine. From the hallway's threshold, I eyed the chair. Only the top of its backrest was visible, utterly still, yet profoundly occupied. The house creaked around me, a sound like dry laughter. "Don't move it," the phrase echoed in the hollows of my mind. Had Silas known? Was this legacy intentional? My fists tightened, heart hammering. The odor intensified. Old hide mingled with something distinctly sour, subterranean. By midday, exhaustion claimed me. I risked resting on the divan again, but each time I settled, the cold vigilance radiated from behind. Once I swore something brushed my hair aside, a feather-light stroke like a desiccated hand grazing my scalp. I sprang up, cracking my knee against the coffee table. a curse escaping my lips. The chair remained impassive, its cushion contouring around the unseen. Tears of pain and terror welled. In desperation, I resolved to shroud it. Locating an old white sheet in a linen drawer, I approached with measured steps, the floorboards glacial beneath bare feet. As I cast the sheet over the armchair, it snagged mid-flight, on nothing tangible, as if catching on an incorporeal shoulder. A strangled gasp escaped me as I tugged, forcing it down. The fabric draped unevenly, but for a stark moment I perceived it. A nebulous outline beneath the white shroud, a human silhouette, bulky and slumped. My heart pounded with suffocating violence. Then, as I stared, transfixed, the sheet dipped where a head might be, tilting upward as if regarding me. I stumbled back, and the sheet slithered off unaided, collapsing silently onto the floor. I fled to the front door, rattling the knob, shouting, kicking. A window, equally impervious. The phone remained inert. The power flickered, died, then sputtered back to life. The house hummed, pregnant with tension, holding its breath. Evening descended, elongating the shadows. I found myself whispering to the void in the chair, pleading, "What is it you want?" My voice sounded frail, alien. I circled the room, illuminated only by a solitary corner lamp. The armchair's leather captured the meager light, accentuating the dents, the scratches. Had they always seemed so deep? The thought of immolation surfaced. I rushed to the kitchen, fumbled for matches, scattering half across the floor with trembling hands. Returning, I stood before the chair, struck a match. The small flame wavered. The presence remained inert. As I brought the match closer, an abrupt puff of frigid air extinguished it. A second match met the same fate, as if something gently exhaled from within the invisible occupant, a calm assertion of control. Nausea surged. I staggered to the bathroom, retching bile into the basin. Cold water on my face. My reflection confronted me, eyes wide with terror, sweat-sheened brow, stubble stark against pale skin. Glancing back at the mirror, I swore I saw it, a fleeting silhouette in the doorway behind me. I whirled, nothing. Yet the reflection, for that split second, had shown a vague architecture of head and shoulders hovering by the frame. Heart hammering a frantic rhythm, I crept back into the hall. The house felt altered, the walls subtly inclining inward. In the living room, a new development. The armchair had pivoted slightly. No longer oriented towards the television, it now angled towards my position. The floorboards groaned under my weight. That sour musk again, thick in the air. An image flared. The photograph, the stern-faced man. Was it him, lingering, trapped? Night fell like a hammer blow, accompanied by a resurgence of heavy rain tapping insistently at the glass. I resumed pacing, massaging throbbing temples. My legs felt unsteady. A sharp ache lodged itself between my shoulder blades. Every glance towards the chair revealed minute shifts, the leather rippling as if inhaling shallowly. I attempted to shove the coffee table aside, but it jammed against a warped floorboard. Frustration erupted. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, voice cracking. The sole response was a soft squeak from the chair's springs. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the divan. Instantly, something gripped my shoulder. Firm, cold. A scream tore from my throat as I lunged forward. Nothing tangible. Only a residual chill spreading through my muscles, inducing tremors. Time became elastic, stretching into an agonizing continuum. Eyelids drooped, heavy with fatigue, yet rest remained elusive. Each descent toward slumber was interrupted by a faint susurrus, like leather whispering secrets. Once, daring a direct look at the chair, I caught its reflection in the glass door of the cabinet behind it. Within that polished surface, a faint silhouette resolved, a suggestion of a head, broad shoulders, hands gripping the armrests. I froze, pulse deafening in my ears. The reflection seemed momentarily sharper, blurred but undeniably there. Looking back at the chair itself, only the indentation remained. Hours crawled by. My thoughts spiraled into despair. Escape, freedom. I seized a dining chair, swung it against a window. The glass refused to yield, resisting like solid rock. Turning back, defeated, I found the armchair had shifted once more, now almost squarely facing me. Its unseen gaze was inescapable. It dominated the space, pinning me with its silent scrutiny. Eventually, the futility became undeniable. The house refused my exit. The chair refused to relinquish its vigil. I sank to the floor, breath ragged, tears stinging my eyes. The storm raged without, mirroring the silent tempest within. My mind raced through frantic possibilities. Feign sleep, submit. In the final, torturous hours of that night, I slumped against the wall, body racked with silent convulsions. Lifting my head, I sought the cabinet's glass door one last time. The silhouette manifested with unnerving clarity, just for a heartbeat, a broad figure leaning forward, observing me with dark, inscrutable curiosity. I blinked, and it dissolved, leaving only the empty room reflected. Yet the reflection itself was a torment. The armchair mirrored as vacant, while its physical counterpart still bore its invisible burden. A cruel discrepancy, mocking my reality. Dawn's grey infiltration seeped through the windows. My lips felt cracked, my throat raw. I tried the front door again, a final, desperate gesture. This time, the knob turned freely. The door swung open without resistance. Outside, the world appeared jarringly normal. Sodden grass, distant trees veiled in mist, a pale, indifferent sky. I hauled myself out, stumbling into the muddy yard. A backward glance framed the armchair in the doorway. A flicker of movement, imagined or real, caught my eye. I turned away, heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs, and slammed the door shut. I never re-entered that house. The property was abandoned, my car carrying me away as swiftly as its engine would catch. Days morphed into weeks, yet small noises still made me flinch. I checked over my shoulder constantly, haunted by a phantom presence. Storefront windows became treacherous mirrors, reflecting not just my own haggard image, but sometimes, fleetingly, something else lurking just behind. My skin retains a subtle coolness, as if perpetually brushed by unseen fingers. Even now, writing this in the transient anonymity of a motel room, faint shapes coalesce in polished surfaces, hinting at what might have followed. The memory of that armchair, its unseen occupant, is an indelible weight. Closing my eyes resurrects the cold pressure on my shoulder, the creak of aged leather. I fled the house, yes, but I fear I didn't leave it empty. Some residue remains, a tenacious presence refusing to release its grasp, and I dread the next reflection, the possibility of seeing it there, gazing back from just behind my shoulder. That night in the Adirondacks, should have been my last. Few would credit the tale, and who could fault their skepticism? I wrestle with it myself, yet the memory is branded onto my mind, each detail stark and indelible. I know the sights, the sounds, the textures of that terror. It was real. For 15 years, since the cusp of my 20s, I had sought solace in solitude, embracing the wilderness with little more than essential gear and the contours of a map. No digital tethers, no satellite guides, just the reliable needle of a compass and the wisdom gleaned from seasons spent under open skies. Competence was my shield, or so I believed. It was the twilight of October. Forecasts promised crystalline air and temperatures hovering agreeably in the mid-40s. Ideal conditions. My truck idled, then fell silent at a trailhead swallowed by wilderness, some 30 miles west of Placid's Lake. The sun, still possessing a measure of strength, watched me shoulder my pack, laden for 3 days adrift. 4 hours melted away on the trail before I found it. A modest clearing perched on elevated ground, sentinel pines and ancient maples standing witness. A stream murmured 50 yards distant, a source of life, yet safely removed should the heavens weep. The earth lay obligingly flat, largely unburdened by stone, a familiar sanctuary, one of countless such places I had called home. Before the swift descent of the autumn dark, my shelter stood pitched, firewood gathered, the rudimentary kitchen arranged. The sun bled spectacularly behind the peaks, dragging the temperature down with it. I drew on fleece against the chill, coaxing flames to life. They spat and danced, embers aspiring towards the nascent stars. Then the moon ascended, immense, luminous, painting the tree line silver. Its brilliance cast my own stark shadow upon the ground. Freeze-dried stew, consumed straight from its foil womb, and the crisp solace of a carefully packed beer marked the day's end. The forest breathed around me, the sigh of wind through branches, the sporadic query of an owl, the furtive rustlings of unseen lives in the undergrowth. Normalcy. Around 10, the fire banked to embers. I retreated into my sleeping bag's embrace. Frost ghosted my breath within the tent's confines. The mid-30s had arrived. Exhaustion claimed me swiftly. A sound tore me from sleep. Weight moving through the woods. Heavy. My watch face glowed 2:17 a.m. The moon remained relentless, bathing the forest in an interrogator's light. Deer, my first thought, nocturnal wanderers I knew well, but this cadence was wrong. The footfalls possessed a ponderous deliberation, alien to ungulates, and beneath it, a wet, snuffling respiration, like a hound afflicted with some deep congestion. Motionless within my nylon cocoon, I listened. The presence drew nearer. Large, bear large perhaps, yet bears are agents of chaos, snapping twigs, crashing through brush. This entity, despite its evident mass, moved with unnerving stealth, punctuated only by the slow, heavy tread and that grotesque inhaling. The steps paused. A deep breathing commenced, suspended somewhere between a rasping wheeze and a guttural growl. It emanated from just beyond the tent wall, scarcely 15 feet away. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs. Cold sweat traced paths down my spine. Ignorance was intolerable. I had to see. With painstaking slowness, I eased the sleeping bag zipper down. The nylon protested, a sound like tearing parchment amplified to impossible volumes in the nocturnal hush. Outside, the breathing ceased, silence stretched, taut and agonizing. Then it resumed, closer now, 10 feet, perhaps less. My hand, trembling, sought the familiar cylinder of my flashlight. Beside it lay the hunting knife, 8 inches of carbon steel, a pitiful talisman against such encroaching mass. It circled, methodical, deliberate footfalls tracing the perimeter of my fragile shelter. I heard it sampling the air, sniffing. The canvas wall yielded inward, a momentary impression as the thing brushed past. My fingers tightened on the flashlight. I thumbed the switch, directing the beam towards the yielding fabric. The shadow cast there defied reason. It towered, easily 9 feet tall. Worse, far worse, were its proportions. Arms grotesquely elongated, dangling well below where knees should articulate. A head vast and malformed. A monstrous gourd balanced precariously atop its frame. My own breath hitched, died. The movement outside stilled once more. It knew. 3 heartbeats pulsed in the void. Then came a sound, neither growl nor roar, but a wet, clicking guttural, like a tongue working furiously against the palate. The rhythm accelerated, intensified. Action, any action, became imperative. The tent felt suddenly like a coffin, a body bag awaiting its occupant. Knife clutched, I erupted from the sleeping bag. The tent zipper snagged, resisted halfway. I tore at it, the sound of breaking teeth sharp in the night. The clicking stopped. I burst forth, flashlight beam slashing wildly across the clearing. Emptiness, moonlight washing over undisturbed ground and silent trees. Then I heard it, behind me. I spun. The beam found it, slammed into it, and my cognitive functions momentarily ceased. Tall, impossibly tall, dwarfing the familiar pines. Its form was a study in wrongness, emaciated, joints bending backward like a wading bird's, skin slick and dark like sodden leather. But the face, dear God, the face, a scattering of eyes, mismatched in size, littered the expanse where a forehead should be. No discernible nose, only twin vertical slits. And the mouth, a nightmarish cavity filled with shards, like shattered glass arranged in concentric predatory rings. Its myriad eyes caught my light, reflecting ruby-orange feline embers in the darkness. I ran, abandoned everything. Tent, warmth, provisions. Plunged into the black woods armed only with light and blade. It pursued. I heard its passage through the trees, that wet clicking sound closing the distance. My legs churned, faster than they had ever moved. Branches lashed my face. Roots and stones conspired to trip me. I fell, scrambled up, ran on. Lungs burned. The clicking intensified, grew louder. Fingers, tipped with something sharp, snagged my jacket from behind. Claws caught, tore fabric. I wrenched free with savage force, heard the fleece rip, didn't stop. The ground fell away beneath me. I lost purchase, began to slide, tumbling down a steep incline in near darkness. The flashlight spun from my grasp, extinguished. My body caromed off tree trunks, bounced over unseen rocks. I landed hard at the bottom. Agony flared in my left arm. Warmth trickled down my face. Blood, blindness, absolute save for the faint moon glow filtering through the canopy. The light was gone. The clicking, above me, close, closing. I struggled upright. My left arm hung useless, likely broken. The knife remained tight in my right fist. Shapes began to resolve in the dimness. One detached itself, moved, descending the slope. I backed away, turned, and ran again, directionless, propelled solely by the need for distance from that. The clicking followed, relentless. A root snagged my foot. I pitched forward, face first into the mulchy decay of leaves. Before I could rise, a grip like hot vices closed around my legs. Claws, feeling like heated needles, pierced my calves. A scream tore from my throat as I kicked, fought. The grip tightened. It began to drag me backward. The stench hit me then. Rot, decay, wet fur. The clicking was directly overhead. Twisting violently, I slashed upward, blindly with the knife. Contact. A yielding softness. Hot, viscous liquid splashed my hand. The thing screamed. A sound like metal grinding against metal, high-pitched, setting my teeth on edge. The claws released. I crab-crawled away, gained my feet, fled anew. The metallic shriek persisted behind me, then mutated back into the clicking, faster now, imbued with fury. Light ahead, moonlight glancing off water. I burst from the trees onto the bank of a wide stream, the same one from near my camp, but further down its course. The water ran deep, swift, churning over submerged rocks, 30 feet at least to the opposite bank. Behind me, branches snapped. The clicking was immediate. I leapt. The water struck like a physical blow, frigid with snowmelt. The current seized me, dragged me under. I clawed my way to the surface, gasping, lungs aching. On the bank I had just vacated, it stood. Its constellation of eyes glowed in the moonlight. It paced back and forth, emitting that incessant clicking. The current bore me downstream. It mirrored my progress along the bank, its unnatural stride easily keeping pace, waiting. Waterlogged clothes became anchors. The cold leached my strength, numbed my extremities. Fingers ceased to report sensation, yet I swam, surrendering partially to the current while angling desperately for the far shore. The clicking grew frantic, agitated. One impossibly long arm reached out, claws like polished daggers catching the moon. Almost there. The water shallowed. I could stand, but my legs refused, seized by cold. I crawled through the shallows, hands and knees finding purchase on slick stones. The creature crouched on its bank, those aberrant legs coiling, preparing to spring. I collapsed onto rocks and mud, hauled myself up the embankment, water cascading off me. Movement was agony. The clicking ceased. I risked a glance back. The opposite bank was empty, silence, save for the rush of water. Then I heard it again, downstream, drawing nearer. It had found another crossing. Frozen limbs obeyed sheer will. I stumbled into the trees, disoriented, knowing only to flee the sound. The woods became a vertiginous blur. Pain was a constant companion. The cold fogged my thoughts, but I moved. The clicking pursued, sometimes faint, sometimes terrifyingly close. It was hunting, toying with me. Hours might have passed. The moon dipped below the horizon, plunging the forest into deeper blackness. I collided with trees, fell, rose, pressed on. Then, lights, not celestial, but artificial, filtering through the dense woods. A road. The clicking surged, loud, immediate, right behind me. I crashed through the final barrier of trees onto blessed asphalt. Headlights swept the darkness. A car approaching. I lurched into its path, waving frantically. Tires shrieked. The car slewed, halting scant feet away. The clicking pulsed from the tree line, impossibly close. The driver's door flew open. An old man emerged. "Jesus Christ, son, you all right?" Words failed me. I could only point, hand trembling violently, towards the woods. The man followed my gesture, his eyes widened in disbelief. I turned. It stood at the forest's edge, framed by the headlights. Every eye glowed. The mouth, filled with its broken glass teeth, stretched into something that might have been a smile. The old man yelped. I heard his car door slam shut, the engine roar to life. The creature stepped forward. In the stark illumination, its details were horrifyingly clear. The damp leather skin bore intricate patterns, like glyphs etched onto hide. Black fluid oozed from the wound I'd inflicted. Its arms, ending in foot-long talons, nearly brushed the ground. Behind me, the car's engine screamed, tires spitting gravel. The old man was aiming for it. The creature took another step. The clicking filled my skull. Headlights washed over it as the car accelerated. It moved with a speed that defied its bulk, a vertical leap, impossibly high. The car shot beneath it, fishtailed, and sped away, tail lights shrinking around a curve. The creature landed on all fours, spider-like. Slowly, it unfolded, rising to its full, terrifying height. This was the end. No strength left to run, no weapon, no hope. It stepped onto the road, clicking, advancing with that grotesque, backward-jointed gait. More headlights pierced the darkness, rounding the same curve. Not the old man's car. Higher, brighter, a truck. The creature froze. Its multitude of eyes swiveled towards the oncoming behemoth. An air horn shattered the night, a long bellowing blast. A big rig, closing fast, horn still blaring. The creature unleashed its metal-grinding scream again. It turned, bounded back into the woods with that stilted, arachnid locomotion, and was swallowed by the trees. Air brakes hissed beside me. The truck idled, a reassuring rumble. A door opened high above. "You okay down there, buddy?" Some old fella flagged me down, said someone was in trouble. I tried to form a reply. The world tilted. The asphalt rushed up to meet me. Consciousness returned in a hospital bed in Lake Placid. Hypothermia, they said. A fractured ulna. Claw marks on my legs requiring 53 stitches. They asked questions. A bear, I told them, panicked, fell down an embankment. The police found my campsite later. Shredded. Tent, sleeping bag, pack, all ravaged. Must have been one hell of a bear, they concluded. I nodded, offered no correction. 3 years have passed. The wilderness calls to me no more. Sometimes sleep offers no refuge. Only the echo of that clicking, the memory of wrong-shaped eyes glinting in the moonlight. I wake drenched in sweat, the chill unrelated to the room's temperature. I know what I saw. The old man saw it. The trucker surely caught a glimpse. We are silent custodians of an unbelievable truth. The knife remains. Its blade is stained with a blackness no solvent can erase. On quiet nights, when the wind stirs the trees outside my window, I sometimes fancy I hear it, that wet, clicking sound. I keep the knife within reach, and I never, ever walk out beneath a full moon.